Back to that breaking news. The Supreme Court just issued an order on President Trump's ballroom. Joining us, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, James Sample, Vaughn Hilliard, and Scott MacFarlane are all still with us. Lisa, what has the court said?
Well, if you wanted a very detailed explanation from the court about what it was going to do about the ballroom, we did not get it. Instead, we got a one-paragraph order from the Chief Justice of the court saying only that the preliminary injunction that had been entered in April that would prevent the president from building above ground is stayed. And this is the key language, pending further order of the undersigned or of the court. What the Chief Justice is doing here is issuing what's called an administrative stay. It is a decision that is designed to prolong the status quo for a short period of time. So if someone is trying to read into this, is this the court putting its thumb on the scale as an entire court making a decision on the merits? It is not. It is just John Roberts in his capacity as what's called the circuit justice, the justice responsible for overseeing the federal appeals court in D.C., saying we're pressing pause. We're allowing the status quo to continue while we as a full court make a decision.
Do you agree with MS Now Chief Justice Lisa Rubin?
I, as an associate justice of the Chief Justice, I would go.
I like the promotion.
A concurring opinion on everything Lisa just said.
Okay, so if it's an administrative stay, just a few days now, we have to wait likely for a decision?
Well, a few days likely, right? The Chief Justice is not telling us when he or the full court will make a decision. So let's talk about the practical impact of this. Donald Trump can continue to do what he has said in his tweet or Truth Social post today that he would do, which is continue to build the ballroom. And as we know from the New York Times and others, he is continuing to build that ballroom with a staff of hundreds, with the kinds of materials that we would not expect in a construction project proceeding on an ordinary pace.
So I have so many questions about the legality of this, and then also turning the White House into a military complex. First, so the legality. On what grounds could you anticipate the Supreme Court ruling for the president? Let's play that exercise first.
Sure. The argument that the administration has made and will make, and would be the argument that the court would adopt if they were to rule in that way, would be that the balance of the equities, now that the ballroom is at whatever percentage of completion it is, favors continuing with the project.
So it worked to ask to do it and then ask forgiveness later?
This is the classic scenario. In fact, in the last segment, we were just discussing the problem that the courts sometimes can't keep up with the executive branch, right? This is do first and get permission later.
Yeah.
And it might actually be successful. That will be the basis of the administration's argument.
If they rule against Donald Trump, what would they base it on, potentially?
The law. They would base it on the law, which is to say that this has been unlawful based on the letter of the law all along, but the law is just parchment. It is just words on paper if the
letter
executive
says
doesn't come.
Congress has to approve this. All right, so where's Congress, Scott?
Well, Congress is the one that has to authorize this. They haven't. That's been part of the issue. But there's another layer to this, to add on to what James and Lisa said. In asking the Supreme Court to intervene, the Trump administration said they have to keep working on this project beyond 11:59 p.m. tonight, the cutoff time, because it was, quote, critical for ensuring the White House can serve as a secure location for the president. That, to me, still seems contorted because the district court judge, whose order has just been stayed, said they can keep doing the below ground work. They could keep doing the security work. What's been halted is the above ground work on things that involve marble and a ballroom. So the Trump administration seems to have had its cake and eaten it too here. They made a security argument, which was kind of baseless because the judge didn't stop the security work, but they still secured the Chief Justice's ruling today. This can continue past midnight and really indefinitely till there's a further argument.
Chief Justice Rubin?
I would say that the Trump administration's national security argument is itself evolving because Scott is right. First, they said that it was the below ground work that was really critical to national security. But lately, they have submitted a number of declarations from cabinet officials that have said even the ballroom itself is a matter of national security. Because, for example, how could the president host a state dinner with heads of state from multiple places around the country? How could he host a meeting without ensuring that there is an adequately safe place for them to be on the White House complex? That is sort of the enlargement and morphing of their security argument that they are now trying to put.
Well, has the safety of the White House complex materially changed?
Those are what Lisa just described, and this is not disagreeing with Lisa Qualisa. Those are arguments that would be phenomenally...
I love your legal jokes between the two of you. It's very
Those
cute.
are arguments that would have a place on the floor of Congress. Those are policy arguments that could have been made if you were trying to do this through the proper channels. They're not after-the-fact justifications for ignoring the law.
Vaughn, I want to bring you in on this. The White House, listen, there's always been the Situation Room. There's always been a bunker. Donald Trump was in it when he was nervous about protests at the White House and in Washington, D.C. at the end of his last term. But this is something different. Explain the change as you've been able to witness it.
And also to add to that, he's also been posting images, AI images of a drone port on top of the ballroom. And Lisa's point about the ever-evolving national security threat that the Trump administration is using to justify the construction of the ballroom entity itself. Forget the chairs and the gold paint inside. But I think that is where you're looking at the way in which we covered so closely in 2022, 2023, 2024, how the Trump legal team effectively was able to stall the justice system and figure out a way in order to run out the clock so effectively. And now we saw them tear down the East Wing efficiently before the courts could intervene. We're seeing them move at a chaotic pace in order to get this up. And part of their filing, too, was the idea that there's now a 70-foot structure and beams that are potentially hazardous and that they are unstable, and that if they were left in disrepair there, that they would pose a threat to the White House grounds. And I think that is where it gets to your question, Katie, here, is about the way in which Donald Trump has used these construction projects as an extension of the threats that he claims are being posed against him. It was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner redo a couple weeks ago where he went off on a whole tangent about the idea of the drone port on top of the ballroom. And let's be clear, there are security threats. There are threats against the president's life, but he is using the installment of the security apparatus, including, even if you look at the fencing around Lafayette Park that they have put up. Lafayette Park is not open to the public right now, and they are putting forward proposals to build up permanent fencing around there. And the justification is for safety purposes, but I think that causes a lot of concern as to what extent can Donald Trump and his team justify national security and safety concerns to get their way with all of these other arguments they're making on a variety of issues.
Yeah, and Scott, at what point does the People's House fully stop becoming the People's House and become a bunker, a safe house, something that is inaccessible to the public, something that we can't even see any longer? As Vaughn was talking about Lafayette Park, you can't get close to the place anymore without a huge security apparatus to make it through. I mean, was this, I'm going to make you put on a presidential historian hat here, was this the intention of the White House to make it a singular and secure space that the president could wrap himself in?
Oh, it's a glorious moment for the husband of an AP U.S. history teacher, Katie. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, good. I knew it.
The East Wing was expanded early in the 1900s and then again in the mid-1900s, not under a security paradigm, but to make a more suitable space for the White House, largely. But I'm wondering about the politics here. I can't think of a Democratic candidate out there who isn't joyful seeing this ballroom remain a fixation of Trump's, as there's dwindling days till an election, and this is about as popular as chicken pox to the public, which can't afford college, health care, food, and fuel. That they're spending $400 million on this hole in the ground is political malpractice for the Republicans.
Please do say hi to your wife for us. AP U.S. history was my absolute favorite subject in high school. So hats off to her and to you for being smart enough to marry her. Lisa, jump in. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about how the Trump administration is sort of using the threats against the president across lots of its legal proceedings right now. So let's talk about the case against Jim Comey, where in a brief, in response to his motion to dismiss that indictment, they talk about the various plots against the president. And I want to quote from it because this is a theme for them across various things that they're trying to do. They say the threat environment for the president is currently the worst our nation has ever seen. In the past 2 years alone, at least 17 individuals have attempted to kill President Trump. So it's not just in the context of the ballroom that they are using the threats against the president and trying to use them to win their way. They are doing so across a variety of matters, whether it is the Seychelles case against Jim Comey or to try and justify the vanity project that Donald Trump wants built at the White House. The national security argument for them and their concept of his enlarged constitutional powers to address those national security issues, Katie, that looms large over everything that the Department of Justice is doing right now, no matter the subject.
There's just a discomfort I have with seeing it turned into a bunker. It just seems like something better suited for the Pentagon, for a military complex, not for the White House, understanding, obviously, the complex threat environment against this particular president, but against national security in general. The world is changing very, very quickly, and there are lots of scary things going on. But at the same time, what makes our democracy is our ability to see and sometimes touch, get close enough to really access the halls of power and the seat of power in this country, and to see it turned into a barricaded bunker gives me discomfort, certainly. Coming up, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Jim, to the point that Peter just made about HAARP as a gatekeeper, here's more from Jonathan Lemire on HAARP's very particular set of skills. HAARP has become an Oval Office gatekeeper, a ubiquitous travel companion, and one of only a few people with the keys to the president's social media account. She's become one of the most unlikely powerful people in the administration. If someone with such a fawning view of the president is their gatekeeper and they are able to filter the information that the president of the United States sees, should the public then wonder if the commander-in-chief is in fact seeing the full picture?
Absolutely. And the fact is, I ran this process in the White House. She never would have got through the front door until she had a security clearance, much less lasted a year. Because to your point, she's sitting with the president of the United States when he's meeting with world leaders, when he's talking to business people, when he's meeting with members of Congress. She's seeing everything that he's doing, and she has no security clearance. It just shows you that this White House doesn't take national security seriously. They stack up boxes in bathrooms. They allow people to travel with the president without security clearance. There's no real process. You have a gatekeeper who's absolutely unqualified. None of this makes any sense in any sort of White House that I would want to be a part of. And people can look at this president and say, what are you doing?
Well, since you are one of the only people we have spoken with who's actually worked through this process before, I have some questions that have been bothering me about this story. One, the fact that Natalie Harp twice declined, I believe was the word, to fill out the paperwork necessary for her security clearance. I have never heard of a White House staffer declining to fill out that paperwork. And two, the fact that the president of the United States, who is currently waging a war of choice with Iran, had to take time out of his daily schedule to tell his own aide, hey, you have to fill out the paperwork in order to get the security clearance necessary. Both show an administration that is simply not focused on the American people or on the agenda that they promised.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Where's the chief of staff? Where's the deputy chief of staff to say, you're filling out this paperwork or you're not getting through the front door? And why wouldn't she? The question is, what is she hiding that she didn't want to fill this out for almost a year? What relationship should she have? What was her concern? Because these are not hard. They take some time and you got to sit down with a lawyer and go through it all. But what was she concerned about that she didn't want to fill this out? And why would the White House in their process allow her anywhere near the president until she had a security clearance?
I'm not sure, Peter, if Jim Messina meant that as a rhetorical question or not, but I am curious if you have reporting on where was Susie Wiles in all of this? Wasn't she supposed to be the key gatekeeper?
Well, she is, obviously, but she recognizes when Trump wants somebody to be near him, she's not going to fight him on things that she's going to lose on, right? And she recognizes, I assume, that the president wants Natalie Harp around him. He wants people around him who tell him he's great, who reinforce for him that he's right about all of these issues, who help him, go after his opponents when he issues these social media, blasts. And I think that one of the secrets of Susie Wiles' success is recognizing the fights that she can win and not taking on the ones that she can't.
Vaughn, do we know why the First Lady was out of the public view for so long and why yesterday was the day she decided to make an appearance?
It's not clear why yesterday was the day. The Indy race is here on Sunday in Washington, D.C., and we are told that she is going to be, along with the president, part of the pace car that does the initial lap around the track. So we know that we will be seeing her there for that. Her introduction, though, yesterday to everyone in the Rose Garden or the Rose Patio was, I think, a particularly unique moment amid this news cycle. Take a listen.
Good afternoon. I heard you missed me. Here I am.
There was the First Lady of the United States in a moment that could very well live in history documentation for a whole while, Alicia.
Pretty incredible. I heard you miss me. It is interesting to me that this comes as Trump's press secretary is leaving. And I wonder, Peter Baker, if that is incidental or if there is something to the fact that one of the people who's been in charge of the president's messaging is no longer.
Well, I think that's a separate thing. I think Karoline Leavitt has her reasons for stepping down. That's a very tough job for anybody under the best of circumstances. She just had her second child, and she would tell you, I think, that she wants to find ways of balancing her life. That's understandable. But yeah, I think that, you know, again, everybody in that White House has to recognize the reality of working for a president who's not a conventional figure there. This is not a George Bush or Barack Obama kind of presidency. This is a president who has made clear that he wants certain people around him, that he wants things done a certain way. And so that's why you see his spokespeople going after Jon Ossoff, but also the media in a very vigorous way in the last few days, because he wants them to be pushing back. But as our friend Jonathan wrote, it's only elevated the story. It's made the story into a much bigger thing than it might have been. And he simply let it go without much comment. People would have moved on, but instead they have sort of forced it into the conversation, and I think it's attracted a lot of attention, especially online.
Vaughn, I want to ask you the same question, but in a different way, which is just in the past week, there's been a flurry of leaks. You have GOP sources inside the White House speaking out. Talk to me both about how unusual that is, and the fact that we're now in a window where you have other people auditioning for the job that Karoline Leavitt once held.
This is a difficult job to hold. And it's going to be a difficult job for anybody coming in that was not a part of the 2023-2024 presidential campaign. As Peter well knows, we've reported about that insulated circle around Donald Trump ever since he left Washington, D.C. post January 20th, 2021. At Mar-a-Lago, it was a small crew around him, including Natalie Harp. There was a small, loyal political circle that included Susie Wiles. I think that there is a question, right? How long is Susie Wiles even committed to this? This is for the president. Of course, if he chooses to have a press secretary come in and replace, it's somebody that he has to have full faith and confidence is to not only going to go and defend the Iran war with the expectation it is continuing, but also be able to go and do what Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee Sanders struggled to do in their past capacities. And that was ultimately push in, the way Alyssa Farah Griffin used to be in the position at the White House, right? You have to go and commit yourself to being unyieldingly loyal to lies and to misrepresentations by the president. And he is keenly aware of what they are saying. And I think that there is a recognition within the White House right now that the jobs of those who remain is going to become increasingly difficult because of the expectations of those who are representing him when on camera. And it's clear where his focus is, around the White House ballroom, around the helipad, suggesting that affordability is not an actual issue, suggests that talks with Iran don't have to exist, that we've already won the war. Those are damning and difficult misrepresentations about the current state of domestic and foreign affairs that the next press secretary is going to have to go out there and commit to at a time in which the president is doubling down in his backing of Natalie Harp, somebody whose letters have now been released. And clearly what the letters do, I think it's important to note, is that it shows just the extent to which some staffers are willing to go in their concessions to the president to meet his favor. In one of these letters that the White House has denied the substance of, Natalie Harp tells the president that he can cuss her out when he so chooses in order to make her better, that she wants to be always a sounding board and be there for him. That is the stakes of what we're talking about in terms of who the president has around him and what the president wants.
Jim, earlier I was listening to an interview between Jim Acosta and Heather Cox Richardson, who I think has been such a clear voice in this moment where we are all concerned about the nature of our democracy. And she said, this is an important story, but don't get lost in it. Don't allow it to be a distraction, because there are lots of other big, important stories happening, whether it is the war in Iran, the president's war of choice in Iran, whether it is an economy that most Americans feel is not working for them. I would argue we can do both. We can talk about all of that. We can talk about the power outages in Indiana. We can talk about the fact that Puerto Ricans, United States citizens, many are currently without water and have been for several weeks now. But it is important to all of us, I would contend, to know where the president of the United States is getting his information from and who he is getting it from, because so much of what we hear from this White House is determined by those inputs.
Absolutely right. And it goes to Peter's point. We're sitting 74 days before the election, and they decided this was the most important thing they could do this week. They went to war to defend this woman because she's the closest person to the president. They didn't spend time talking about expenses. They didn't spend time talking about how to get out of this war. They didn't spend time talking about how to lower oil prices or gas prices. They decided to defend the person closest to the president because they understand how damning this indictment is and how it shows a White House out of control, who is surrounded by lackeys who will only tell the president what he wants to hear. And yet in 74 days, the voters get to make their choice. And, if you look at the numbers, he's underwater with independent voters by 47 points. Like, we just haven't seen numbers like this before. And you can see why. Voters have started to figure out that he doesn't care about them.
Good evening from New York. I'm Ali Velshi in for Chris Hayes. It's a sad kind of conventional wisdom at this point that an approval rating of 30% is pretty much Donald Trump's floor. There are some 30% of Americans who will support him no matter what he does or says. And that's exemplified in his latest approval rating from Reuters Ipsos, where he sits at a 33% approval rating, which matches the lowest point that he hit in his first term in that same poll. So about 33% of Americans have decided he's my guy. They're fine with paying more for gas. They're fine for paying more for groceries and appliances. And I actually buy the 30% argument. We've seen it play out over two different terms. It's his polling dam, if you will, but the dam is breaking. Zeteo is reporting that Trump advisors worry that he could sink into the high 20s. Now, apparently, in the weeks before we got all this declining poll numbers, several people, quote, some administration officials, some outside Trump advisors began privately conceding that it was distinctly possible that Trump could hit the high 20s in major polls, end quote. And the private polls, and those that are commissioned by various arms of the Republican Party, aren't much better, according to one operative close to the White House who has knowledge of that data, which apparently has caused, quote, a sustained bedwetting from much of the party that President Trump is going to drag them down hard in the critically important midterms. And so the hardcore MAGAs, the stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone crowd, maybe even they're saying to themselves, this just isn't worth it anymore. And mathematically speaking, those are pretty much the only people he has left to lose. Now, as the data guy around here, I will admit, apart from the Zeteo reporting, this is a bit of postulation because polls are not elections, and we all know that. But they do give you a snapshot of how people feel and think at the time the poll is taken. They give you a sense of trend. And by the way, all the polls on this say pretty much the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's a poll from Fox News or Reuters or YouGov or The Economist or AP. They're all telling basically the same story. Donald Trump is on a downward slope, but that's okay because that happens too. The problem is that it's 74 days until the election, and he's got, in my opinion, no tricks left up his sleeve. Remember, his whole shtick during the campaign was vote for me to lower prices.
Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again.
We're going to bring prices way down, and we'll get it done fast.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
I want on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries.
I started using the word the groceries? He's right, by the way. He did win on groceries, that beautiful, old-fashioned, quaint word, groceries. But now, well, as soon as it was his responsibility, his tune changed to it being a hoax.
The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats.
They have a new word. They always have a hoax. The new word is affordability.
The word affordability is a fake word but made up by the Democrats.
They used the word, first time I heard it,
It was a word, made up by the Democrats. Affordability. In my first day, the press said, what are you going to do about affordability? It was a word they devised, affordability. No, they never used that word before.
I'm not going to get into whether anybody's ever used the word affordability before, but let's get past that. The real problem with that messaging is that most people in this country are living inside that affordability crisis, whether or not they use that word, right? You might just come home and say, wow, it cost me $120 to fill a gas. That's not you didn't use the word affordability, but you're making the same point. And the president's not doing anything about it. As oil prices keep going up and the national debt balloons, he will not end this war that he started with Iran, despite having no leverage, and no other way out of that war other than saying, forget it. As American service members are pushed on extended deployments, he will not acknowledge how hard it is for them, saying that they haven't been at sea in combat conditions long enough. Blame the sailors. Blame the soldiers. As his masked federal agents continue to round up our neighbors, and they killed 2 Americans in the streets, and they killed and severely wounded several foreign nationals who weren't even the targets of law enforcement, he decided rolling out dystopian stun gloves to that same force of officers might be a good idea. As everyday Americans struggle with rising costs, affordability as he calls it, he's out there in front of the White House bragging about a remodel that you're paying for, from the ballroom that the Supreme Court just greenlit, to the reflecting pool, to the helipad that has been put in and ripped out and put in again, and the little walkway that he wants between the two.
You can see the kind of granite this is. This granite has a million-year life. It's a very strong stone. It will never break. It will never leak. It will never do anything. This is the highest quality stone you can get.
This is what he's talking about. He's out there every day doing things that people do not like or do not care about. Look no further than the South Carolina Republican Senate primary runoff for proof. Donald Trump is hitting the campaign trail, not in a battleground state or even for a battleground member. He's in deep red South Carolina holding one of his hallmark campaign rallies for Darlene Graham right now. RN, as the kids say. The strategy has left many confused, including one longtime Republican operative in South Carolina. Quote, if I were the president, if I were giving him political advice, I'd say, we're right next to Georgia. We're right next to North Carolina. Texas ain't that far away. There are some real places that are going to affect the party keeping control of either the House or the Senate, and it's like he's just flying over them and ignoring them, end quote.
You see that? And as soon as we're finished with the Islamic Republic of Iran, as soon as we're finished, oil is going to be down at lower than it was even just a little while ago. We had it down to, for your cars, we had it down to 100. Think of this. I went to Iowa, love Iowa, and one gas station had it at $1.95 a gallon, and another one had it at $1.85. And then I went to meet with my people back in the White House the following day. So we went down and we stopped them. They'll never have a nuclear weapon. They want to make a deal so badly. We don't even know if we want, because I view the Strait of Hormuz as an American territory right now. It's an American territory.
I mean, I don't know what to say. Beef is not coming down very rapidly. Neither is oil. And the Strait of Hormuz is not an American territory. And so finally, there is a glimmer of consequence. The midterms are 74 days away. Labor Day is just around the corner. This is the home stretch. It's when people who aren't paying attention, like we are, start paying attention. And every Trump poll is trending in the same direction. So for everyone pearl clutching and hand wringing about Democrats not being able to get it together, and I'll grant you this, I've been one of those people for a little while. Wow. Things they sure have changed, haven't they? Republicans are all but admitting it. Trump has given them less than nothing to campaign on. Amanda Litman is the co-founder and president of Run for Something and the author of When We're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership. Max Rose is a U.S. Army veteran of the Afghanistan War and a Democrat who represented Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn in the House. He's now a senior advisor for Vote Vets. Thank you, my friends, for being with me tonight. Max, I just want to start with you because fighting for your country and agreeing to maybe sacrifice your life for your country, it's a big deal. And most of us do not make that commitment. You are one who has. These sailors on the USS Abraham Lincoln, have some real beef about what's been going on.
Sure.
Their ship has turned around. They've been at sea for over 9 months. He mocks them. He doesn't respect them. Being in a war that the country doesn't understand, they don't get support for, that's happened before in America. It's happened in Afghanistan. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Vietnam. It's happening again. But at least support your damn troops.
Sure. And look, this is not the first time Donald Trump has done this.
No.
Right? This is the guy who called the fallen suckers and losers. You know, we all know about the dotted line that service members sign on where they swear an oath to protect and uphold the Constitution, even if it means losing their own life, the ultimate sacrifice. But there's another implicit promise that our nation's leaders make to those service members, which is should they make the decision that they will go to war, one, they'll make sure that it is a constitutional process.
Yep.
Two, they will make sure it's well thought out.
Yes.
That there is a plan, that contingencies are considered. They won't just say, hey, it's a 4 to 6 week war or conflict. We'll be fine. They think it through. That's not what happened with this conflict. And we are seeing the consequences of it. Yes, with the Lincoln, but in so many other ways.
In so many other ways. There are 12 service members who have died, and lots of innocent people have died. And Amanda, there are a lot of people who might ideologically be against this war or any other war we've been involved in. But let's say you and I were ideologically against this war. I would still appreciate if they were running it, that they would run it like not a joke and not a video game.
They should take it seriously because it's people's lives.
Yes.
It's also good politics to take it seriously. And I think this is one of the things that is really going to screw him and the Republican Party over in the midterms is the explicit promise he made to young men in particular, no new foreign wars.
Yeah.
And we heard this in focus groups and exit polls over the course of 2024. You know, I don't want to go to war. No new foreign engagements. He broke that promise and now is treating it like a
Many
game.
times over. We talk only about Iran, but it was 8 different times. It kind of is Iran because it was hit twice. Max, let me ask you about. I've had this conversation a few nights. I had it with David Jolly a few nights ago. I'm going to be talking to Angie Nixon in Florida. And I asked David Jolly, I said, you both won in Florida. So there are people who voted for a former Republican member of Congress and a DSA candidate. And David Jolly said to me, we both went to the same meetings. We both talked to the same people. We both get the same questions, and we both have the same answers. People want their stuff to cost less, and they'd like their government fundamentally to work. I ask you this as a guy who ran as a Democrat in a place that's fairly Republican and won.
Sure. Look,
and lost.
That is true. Although, you know, when you and I have often talked about when you win, you look like a genius, man. And when you lose, it takes a little while to get invited back on TV. So thanks for that. But look, in the end, right, voting is an emotional process. And people respond to who they see. They respond to the message. They respond to who shows up. But I would also say this, amidst all this talk, and it makes for good show business about these ideological divisions within the Democratic Party, I don't see it.
Yeah, and let's be fair. If one were putting you onto a spectrum, you're not on the more progressive side of the spectrum.
Listen, I resist any effort to put me on the spectrum.
That's my point. You don't want to get involved in that discussion.
Because it's irrelevant.
Okay, I'm helping you make your point.
The Democrats are talking about universal health care.
Yeah.
There's different tactics to achieve it, but they all agree that we should not rest until everyone has a home, everyone has health care, everyone's costs are driven down. That's the universal project here. So, yes, there's some debate about tactics, but when the Democrats are this homogenous entity that gets behind a person or a policy universally without thinking, we lose. So I like the debate.
Yeah.
I like some of that chaos. That's representative of a dynamic party. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength.
So, Amanda, Max said something, and I'm hearing it from every candidate, particularly when they're up against, with 20 points against them or something. Who shows up? Your entire operation is about showing up. It's about people running for office, not picking districts where they are likely to win, just running for office. How many unlikely successes have we watched in the last 12 months? Starting right here in New York with Zohran Mamdani. That guy wasn't polling at 5%.
Run for Something alone has helped Taylor Amet down in Texas win in a district, a state Senate seat that Trump won, I think, by 17 or 19 points. We helped Emily Gregory flip Mar-a-Lago blue. Trump is now represented by a Democrat in the state house in Florida because Emily put in the work to talk to voters. She's now running up again this fall. We've seen this over and over and over again. And I think it's to what Max was talking about. They are talking about solutions. They understand that voters do not have ideologies. Voters have problems. They want solutions. And mostly they want to not think about all this too much. And candidates who are speaking to those problems, who are giving them a path and a vision for what else might be possible, they're going to be able to win, honestly, regardless if it's an R or D or progressive or centrist or moderate after their name.
Today, I should tell you, the USS Abraham Lincoln is finally heading home after a brutal and record-breaking time at sea. The aircraft carrier and its crew of about 5,000 sailors are on their way to San Diego. We here on the show have been covering the concerns of family members of those aboard the Lincoln for a while now. Concerns about sailors' mental health, their safety on deck, a lack of supplies, food shortages, water contamination, you name it. Family members say the situation on the ship had become so dire that multiple sailors have attempted to go overboard. Now, of course, the Pentagon has denied all of these concerns. Trump himself has even denied the very fact that military families are concerned, which is quite a thing to deny. And while a lot of reporters have done a really excellent job covering what has been happening on the USS Lincoln, including our colleagues here, Priya Sridhar and Lindsay Papia, but one outlet's coverage has been particularly notable. The military newspaper Stars and Stripes, the one I just mentioned in Talking with Allie. And that's because as a publication partially funded by the Pentagon, their coverage was effectively reporting on themselves. While a lot of civilians might be unfamiliar with their work, Stars and Stripes is a key part of our news ecosystem. If you work in government, if you work in national security, you definitely read Stars and Stripes, as do so many military families across the world. The paper was founded during the Civil War and has been continuously published since World War II. While other news outlets chase all sorts of stories, Stars and Stripes is just focused on what is happening in our military, day in and day out. They have a record of reporting on the military objectively, even on sensitive topics that might make the military look bad. For military members and their families all around the world, it is a key news source. It's also a key news source for us in the larger news world. And the reason it is so key is because it is editorially independent from the Pentagon, or at least it has always been. Now, back in January, the Washington Post reported that applicants for jobs at Stars and Stripes were being asked how they would support President Trump's policies. They were asked questions like, how would you advance the president's executive orders and policy priorities in this role? And identify one or two relevant executive orders or policy initiatives that are significant to you and explain how you would help implement them if hired. Not exactly the kind of questions you would ask an independent newspaper to ask its prospective hires, right? Well, it turns out leadership in the newspaper didn't know that these questions were being asked. They were being asked automatically by the government website that prospective hires applied through. They were being asked by the Trump administration, essentially. Now, the day after that report, the Pentagon's chief spokesperson, Sean Parnell, tweeted that the Pentagon was returning Stars and Stripes to its original mission, reporting for our warfighters, which to him meant, quote, and these are his words, refocus its content away from woke distractions. Now, the first real clue as to what that actually meant came from the conservative outlet, The Daily Wire. Pentagon officials told The Daily Wire that the plan was for the paper's content to be written by active duty service members, with 50% of the paper's content composed of materials generated by the Pentagon. And amazingly, no one told the people who actually ran Stars and Stripes that was the plan. The editor-in-chief of the paper, Eric Slavin, told the New York Times that all he had to go on was what he had read in the Daily Wire. Now, for its entire history, Stars and Stripes has been partly funded by the Pentagon, and its staffers have been Defense Department employees. But Congress mandated the publication be independent. Congress even mandated that the newspaper hire an ombudsman whose entire role would be defending the paper's editorial independence. In response to questions the Trump administration was making their prospective hires answer, the paper's ombudsman at the time, Jacqueline Smith, told the Washington Post, quote, asking prospective employees how they would support the administration's policies is antithetical to Stripes' journalistic and federally mandated mission. A few months later, the Pentagon issued a memo drastically expanding its oversight of the paper. The The memo barred the paper from running stories from wire services like the Associated Press and even banned cartoons from being run. And most importantly, stated that the paper's content had to be consistent with, quote, good order and discipline. Now, as the paper's ombudsman told CBS News, they could say anything is against good conduct. The paper's ombudsman told the Washington Post that the memos threatened Stars and Stripes' continued editorial independence and that it did so at the detriment of the troops who rely on the newspaper for complete coverage and continued accurate coverage that is not propaganda. A month later, she was fired. And she put it in her final column. Apparently, the Pentagon also doesn't want you to hear from me anymore about threats to the editorial independence of Stars and Stripes. That's what she wrote in her final column. No official reason was given for her firing, but she also wasn't able to contest it. And then last month, one of the newspaper's reporters, Laura Cordy, gave one of the most appropriate statements I could really ever imagine a reporter giving about her role at the paper. Here was that statement, given as part of an interview with CBS News.
I'm working for Stars and Stripes, not for the Pentagon, not for any administration, not for any policymaker. I'm here to cover the military community.
Today, Cordy was fired. In a statement, she said that the Defense Department had fired her for insubordination because of her statement to CBS, because she said she works for Stars and Stripes and not the Pentagon, because she said that paper was independent. Today, the Pentagon also fired the paper's editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief says he was fired for insubordination over something he said in an interview when answering a hypothetical question about his journalistic standards, a question about where his red line would be if the Pentagon attempted to censor or withhold unfavorable news.
Do you have red lines in your mind?
Yes, I do.
Give me a red line.
Well, don't run a perfectly accurate story. Run this instead. Here it is, written by the Pentagon. That would be a red line.
Joining me now here at the table is Eric Slavin, who you just saw in that clip, the editor-in-chief of Stars and Stripes, who was fired today by the Pentagon. And with us live from Germany is Laura Cordy, a Stars and Stripes reporter who was also fired today. Thank you both so much for being here. I know today must have been a whirlwind for both of you. Let me start with you, Eric. For people who are just tuning into this, we just gave them a whole lot of information there. We tried to. Walk us through what happened today.
Well, certainly this was not what I expected when I woke up in the morning. I was going about my job. I was planning stories. I was planning one of Laura's stories, actually, about the Navy evacuees from Bahrain and the challenges that they're facing. And then around 12:30 in the afternoon, I received a notice of proposed separation from the Pentagon Public Affairs Office.
An email?
An email, yes. The email said that I would be separated in no less than 5 business days.
And did they give you any explanation in that email?
Yes, they pointed to the CBS interview, and they said that my hypothetical that you just saw, which didn't say I would disobey anything or contradict anything. It simply said that I would affirm what the policy is, which is no news censorship or management. And that's been the DoD policy. That's been in the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's been in a number of places. So I feel like I affirm that, but they consider that insubordination.
And that was the clip we just played, to be clear. That's
Yes.
what they're saying you were fired for today.
Mm-hmm.
Let me bring you into this, Laura. I know, and I just read part of the statement, but again, for people who were tuning into this story, and you were coming to us from Germany. So first of all, thank you for being up with us and sharing this. I think it's so important for people to hear about. When and how did you learn that you were fired today?
My timeline was quite similar to Eric's. As he mentioned, we were working on putting out a story today, going about our jobs. And it was more like 6:30 p.m. my time, I received an email with the notice of separation.
And were you given a similar reason? Were you given a reason in that email as well?
Yeah, similarly, they cited the CBS interview. They specifically cited the comment that you referenced about how I work for Stars and Stripes, which is in fact a statement of fact and a reaffirming of our editorial independence. And they said they consider that insubordination, and similarly gave me a 5-day period.
I have to ask, I mean, as I noted, I'm a reader of Stars and Stripes. We've used your reporting as we've talked about the USS Abraham Lincoln and a number about the war in Iran and a number of other occasions. Stars and Stripes has been reporting on everything from munition shortages, accurate accounts of the number of service members, something that we don't always have accurate information on from the Pentagon, as well as military families stranded in the Middle East. Laura posted a story on that just today. I just wonder how you think about your firing in the context of all that reporting.
Well, I'm very proud of the reporting that we've done, especially in recent weeks. We were the first to report many details of what happened aboard the USS Lincoln. And I'm concerned about the future rights of service members to a free and independent press. I think that what we do is one of the greatest expressions of American values that we can show the world. We believe in the First Amendment so much that we are willing to partially fund a newspaper that at times may hold government to account.
I know this is not what they stated. They stated specifically the CBS News report, but or your interview, I should say, is there any part of you that is concerned that some of the reporting that was critical of the handling of the war or some of those topics I just mentioned was a factor here?
Well, as you said, it wasn't in the separation notice that I received, so it's hard for me to speculate if that was a factor, but we do know that the administration wasn't happy about the reporting. They didn't single out Stars and Stripes, but they did talk about the reporting on the USS Lincolns.
Laura, what do you also posted a story just today. It was about families who've been evacuated from Bahrain and the challenges they're going through. We can reshare that as well. I've gone through a lot of your reporting today. What do you think? Do you have that concern that even though it wasn't stated in the email to you that it could have been a factor?
I mean, it's hard to say at this point. Similar to Eric, there was no mention of any specific articles in my notice of separation. I will say we have been, covering this protracted conflict in Iran pretty diligently for the past 6 months, and I'm really proud of the coverage that me and my colleagues have produced. I think it's important. There are families and service members going through a lot right now, and some people may feel like that reflects good or bad on, the government given the situation, but it's simply the truth. It's simply the fact of the matter. And we feel like we owe it to service members to share the reality about their experiences.